So very good evening to all of you and welcome to the another session, another interesting session on international tax. So this discussion is available on the YouTube in case you want to watch it again or you want to share it with someone, you may please feel free to share uh, the YouTube link of this YouTube channel. Very warm welcome to all the participants. Very good evening to all of you and welcome to this happens with me every time. Another interesting session just on international tax. Okay, so typically what happens, many a times I receive a query that we are making a payment for the database, for the subscription of the database, whether there should be any withholding of tax on the same or not, whether there should be any TDS on the payment of the database charges or not. So I thought it would be a good to discuss the taxation of database subscription charges to payable to non-resident or paid to non-resident, whether they are taxable under the Income Tax Act or not. And at the end, we're also going to evaluate the taxability under the equalization levy, whether the equalization levy is applicable on this database subscription charges or not. So typically, one can say there are two types of databases. One, which does not have any copyrighted article or data. Simply what they do, whatever is available in the public domain, they compile the same, put it in a very nice format, in a very searchable format, and give it to you. The subscribers, they have the ready access of that information. The advantage to them is, the information becomes easily accessible. They can easily search the information. They can apply various filters. So instead of going into the various database, for example, Google or some news media, news channel, they can simply go to the database they have subscribed, and that database will give all the information. And all the information or an article or data available in that on that database is not a copyrighted information. Means that information is available free of cost to everyone. It's just that it has been compiled nicely in our database. The another type of database could be the database which has got the copyrighted information or a copyrighted article or a copyrighted data, or may not also have the non-copyrighted information. So for example, when we subscribe to, let's say, Netflix or Amazon, or any taxman, for example, or maybe a ProS, or maybe there are a lot of database available. So they have the copyrighted information or an article available. So the movies that are available on the Netflix, or the information that is available on the taxman database, for example, it could be copyrighted, it could not be copyrighted. And same thing happens when you deal with the globally, when you subscribe to global databases, maybe Gartner, maybe Factiva, or maybe some other database. So broadly, we can say that the database may have the publicly available information that may have the copyrighted information, or the database may also have the non-copyrighted information. So when we subscribe to a database, what exactly we get? So the right of a users, when you subscribe to a database, generally can be seen as we get access to content, the subscribers, they generally have the right to access the content available on the database during the subscription period. So if we have taken a subscription of any database, it comes with the time horizon, maybe 3 months, 6 months, or maybe 1 year, or maybe 2 years, 6 years, whatever. So till that subscription period is there, one may able to go and access the information. And after the subscription period gets over, once the subscription period gets over, we may not be able to access the information. And within that database, you will find there could be some premium information, for which, let's say, there could be, you might have taken a silver subscription, there could be a gold subscription. So there could be different type of subscriptions available within the database. So depending upon what type of subscription one has taken, that gets the access to the data. Second is the search and retrieval. We can search what information we are looking for from our profession perspective. If we have, let's say, subscribe for some international database, maybe BNA, maybe Cluers, then you can go into those databases and search what news you are looking for, or what kind of research item or an article you are looking for. You can then retrieve the same. Similarly, in our day-to-day, we have seen, that when we want to search any movie, we may go to any OTT platform and do the search. And these are some of the common features, whether I talk about any of the database, these are some of the common features or rights, which subscribers get. Because unless we are clear what we are getting, we may not be able to classify that transaction into, whether that transaction is a business income, whether the transaction is a royalty, whether the transaction is an FTS, fee for technical services. So once we classify a particular need payment, then only we can, check whether the transaction is taxable or not. So before we classify, we must be clear what we are getting. So when we are accessing any database, that information is specifically for us, I would request everyone to kindly put their mic on a mute mode. Thank you, Sachin. Or the information is for every subscriber. So, when we have subscribed for any database, anyone can subscribe and watch and, search that information and go to the content and use that content. Is it only for me, or is it for every subscriber? So generally in the database, the information is for every subscriber. The one who subscribes get the access to the content. Downloading and saving. Some database gives you an option that you can download. You can save that information on your laptop, on some hard drive. And there may be some database which does not give option at all to download or save. But the question comes, does the downloading or saving makes the payment which we are making as a royalty? So we will look into that. We're going to have a look into the Copyright Act, whether simply a downloading creates some kind of a right under the Copyright Act, which means, when we are making the payment, it is a royalty, or it is an FTS. So we are just discussing the general rights which a subscriber gets. Printing and copy, you can, from the database itself, you can give a command to print, or you may create a copy of that information, or it may very well happen that the information which you have, the information which is available on the database, you may not be able to take the printout of the same. But just because the database has given you a right to copy, or I will not say right to copy, rather permission to print, does it make that information copyrighted information, or that payments for the database makes it as a royalty. I think that is something which we need to evaluate. Usage right, you know, generally this right is not available. But what happens in this, whether you can modify the content, you can distribute the content. So technically speaking, the database, whatever database you talk about, the information which they are giving to you, the copyrighted information that we are getting, we are not allowed to redistribute the same. Even we are not allowed to do the photocopy of a book and distribute among the same among our friends. Or if there is any article, we have permission to download the article on our system, but the permission is not there to distribute that article, to redistribute that article. And certainly, one has got the right that, if there is any need for any IT support, or if there is a need to update, one gets the right to update and maintenance of the database. But why we are subscribing to that database is because of the content, is because of the information, is because of the data available on the database. Now, once we are clear on the payment, that the payment which we are making to the database, first of all, the taxability needs to be seen under Section 9 of the Income Tax Act, and the first clause which comes into the mind, in absence of any physical presence. I'm assuming there is no physical presence of the non-resident in India. And generally, we will see that, the physical presence is missing. And if there is a physical presence, you interact with the physical presence, you deal with the physical presence. In that case, there is a risk of permanent establishment or a business connection for that matter. And, business connection, agency business connection per se, and the taxability would happen under that clause. But for the purpose of discussion, for purpose of this discussion, I'm assuming the payment which we are making to the non-resident for some international database, the such non-resident does not have any physical connection in India, even in the form of an agent. So the first clause, which we need to evaluate is significant economic presence under Section 9(1)(I), explanation 2A, which reads, for the removal of doubts, it is hereby declared that significant economic presence of a non-resident in India shall constitute business connection in India, and significant economic presence for this purpose shall mean transaction in respect of any goods, services, or property carried out by a non-resident with any person in India, including the provision of download of data or software in India, if the aggregate of payments arising from such transaction or transactions during the previous year exceeds such amount as may be prescribed. And that amount prescribed, we'll see what is that. But if you see, if you read section, the clause A of explanation 2A, it says transaction in respect of any goods or services with any person in India providing of download of data or software. So now, if you have an access to the database and it crosses the threshold is rupees 2 crores. It is given in rule UD 11 UD. Now, if the transaction value total is more than 2 crores, then it will form significant economic presence under explanation 2A clause A. Now, this 2 crores, does it mean that if I am paying, let's say, subscription charge of 5 lakh or 10 lakh, it is less than 2 crores, so it will not become SCP? The answer is no. When it says 2 crores, it means the total, in our example, total subscription charges earned by a non-resident. If from these activities, if the total revenue earned by a non-resident from India is more than 2 crores, in that case, it will form a significant economic presence in India, which is indeed a business connection. Even though, I have paid only, let's say, the 5% of 2 crores, which is 10 lakh, or maybe the 1% of 2 crores, it hardly matters until the total value is more than 2 crores. So once it becomes more than 2 crores, it will have a significant economic presence. So the question comes, when as a resident or when as a subscriber I am making a payment, what is my role? What should I do? And if I'm a chartered accountant and if I'm issuing a 15 CB when the client comes to us for the issuance of 15 CB, wherein we are checking the tax position, at that time, what we should do. So very clearly, just because your client has entered into a small transaction, I don't think that should be a good idea to conclude the conclusion. To make any conclusion, the focus should be, or the right approach would be, to ask the taxpayer whether you're falling under the SCP clause or not. But we'll just park it, because there could be a scenario that once though one is falling under SCP, but because of some another section, one may move out from the SCP. This we have already seen. Now, also, we have explanation 2, of clause 6. Because if it is considered as a royalty, then it would again become taxable under the Act. But before I move on to royalty, why it is not an FTS? Why it is not fee for technical service? Because they are not dedicatedly providing service to you. So if they have the article that they have written is the copyright or the IP of that article, or the database is with them, what you are getting is, what you're doing is only you are using the database. So if you are only using the database, it is not a service, because under the fee for technical service, the there must be the application of manpower. The services must be provided by the manpower. For example, when we say consultancy, technical, or managerial, it all includes the element of manpower, a very high degree of element of manpower. Whereas under royalty, I generally say, we can say that it is sort of a rent for using an IP, for using an intellectual property, or for using an intangible, wherein we do not own thing, but we do not get the ownership of an intellectual property. We do not get ownership of intangible. What we are doing, we are only using that intangible. It's something like, when there is a tangible thing, when you become the owner, you do not pay rent. But until you become the owner and you are using that tangible property, you pay rent. Similarly, royalty is for the usage of intangible property, one can say, uh, in broader sense. So the question comes whether I am using any IP, the payment which I'm making. So probably, if you will go through explanation 2, I think in some of the cases it may happen that the transaction may fall under this fourth clause, the imparting of any information concerning technical, industrial, commercial, or scientific knowledge, experience, or skill. Otherwise, then this clause 4, to best of my understanding, generally the transaction will not fall under clause 4, clause 6 of 91191. So it may not become royalty except under this. But we do have significant economic presence, and we do have this kind of scenario that uh, under 916 clause 4, explanation 2 clause 4, it may become a royalty. Then what to do? In such case, section 90 subsection 2 read with subsection 4 and 5 of section 90 allows the excess of double taxation avoidance agreement. And there are a lot of jurisprudence we have wherein the courts have said that the most favorable statute will apply if double taxation avoidance agreement is more favorable to the taxpayer. In that case, the taxpayer has an option to opt for the double taxation avoidance agreement. But if Income Tax Act is more favorable, the taxpayer may opt for the Income Tax Act. It is at the option of the taxpayer. So now we'll go to the DTA. I have, for the reference, I'm using DTA with US. This is Article 12.3 of the Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement. But yes, certainly before we give the excess or the benefit of US DTA or any other double taxation avoidance agreement, the non-resident must submit the tax residency certificate along with the form 10F if the required information is not there under 10 uh, NTRC. So Rule 21AB, Sub Rule 1 read with Sub Rule 2 will support in this. So the non-resident should have this information. Interestingly, many of us, when you discuss, the people say in such case one should not take permanent account number. I have got a different view. I believe in such case the permanent number is required. The non-resident must take permanent account number. And also, if they want to take the DTA benefit, they must file the return in India. Because if you see section 115A, it only gives the exemption, or I will say safe harbor, to only those non-residents for whom the tax have been deducted at the as per the Income Tax Act, that is, the rate given under section 115A. But if somebody is taking the advantage of double taxation avoidance agreement, in such case, the taxation is not happening under section 115A, which means the exemption is not there to file a return, and one cannot file return until there is permanent account number. So if you are dealing with any of such case, and if you have the non-residents as your clients, then they must apply for PAN. You must communicate to them, then they should take permanent account number and they must file a return in India. Now, coming back to Article 12.3 of USDTA, certainly royalty is taxable. The right to collect a tax on royalty is with the source state, in our example, India. But what royalty is, it says payments of any kind received as a consideration for the use of or the right to use any copyright of literary, artistic, or scientific work, including cinematograph films, work on films, tape, or other means of reproduction for use in connection with radio or television broadcasting, any patent, trademark, design, or model plan, secret formula, or process or information concerning industrial, commercial, or scientific experience, including gains derived from alienation of any such right or property which are contingent on the productive use or disposition thereof. So it becomes important for us to understand what copyright is. So unless we are clear on the meaning of copyright, we may not be able to appreciate, what Article 3 says. And this, we have a very landmark judgment by Apex Court of India in case of engineering analysis. So let's see, what the copyright is. So this is section 14 of the Copyright Act. There are other sections, but just to give you the feel, how Copyright Act works. For the purpose of this, copyright means the exclusive right subject to the provision of this act to do or to authorize the doing of any following acts in respect of a work or any substantial part thereof, namely, in the case of literary, dramatic, or musical work not being the computer program, to reproduce the work in any material form, including the storing of it in any media by electronic means, to issue copies of the work to the public, not being copies already in circulation, to perform the public work in public or communicate it to the public, to make any cinematograph, film, or sound recording in respect of the work, to make any translation of the work, to make any adaptation of the work, or to do in relation to a translation or an adaptation of work, any of the acts specified in relation to the work in subclause 126. So basically, and we may see I would request all of you to kindly go through the Copyrighted Act, and I would be sharing the same in my WhatsApp community. If you are part of that community, you will get Copyright Act 1957. I would be sharing this presentation also in my WhatsApp community. So when the point which I want to bring home, through this section 14. And I would request you to kindly go through that Copyright Act, because it's a separate discussion altogether. But yes, but when we are just having an access to the information, when I'm just visiting a database, reading what is written, using the data, am I getting any copyright? The question comes, am I getting any copyright? Can I reproduce the same? Can I make copy and go to the public and distribute the same? The answer is no. So we are not getting any copyright. What we are getting is the copyrighted article. And there could be an information, which I said, there are two types of database, two type of databases, one which has got the publicly available information, which does not have any copyright. In that case, whatever you are getting, if you are making a copy, it is not a copyrighted article. So whatever you do, you may do, you're not getting any copyright because it's a public information. But wherein the database has got an article authored by some engineer, some scientist, maybe some chartered accountant. In that case, the author of an article is that scientist, the copyright is with that scientist. You have got permission to download that article and use that article for your own purposes, but you cannot make copy of that article and circulate in public. You cannot start distributing that article through your email. Maybe sometimes we see that on WhatsApp, many people share lot many things. They will download some information from a database and keep circulating. But friends, in that case, if the database owner becomes strict, they might file a complaint against us under the Copyright Act 1957, because copyright on that data is with the database, or maybe with the author of that article, but not with us. What we are getting is a limited right to read that copyrighted article or to save for our purpose that Copyright Act allows, nothing more than that. Now, based on this, uh, we have got the recent judgment, one by Delhi High Court in the Relax Singh, then the Bangalore ITAT in case of plural site, Delhi Tribunal in case of updating, and there are other judgments also wherein all the tribunals in the court, they have said that the payment of subscription charge will not become a royalty under the act, read with the double taxation avoidance agreement. So this is what the position is coming up, and this position is generally, if you see various rulings, most of the I will say courts or the tribunals, so they have relied upon the ruling by the Supreme Court of India in the matter of Engineering Analysis Center of Excellence Private Limited, which came uh, before them, and they have placed a faith on the ruling given by the court in March 21. So they've said, the court very categorically said in this case, it will not become a royalty. So if it is not a royalty, then what it is? Can it be taxed under equalization levy? The answer is yes. If we read section 163(3) of the Finance Act, it says it shall apply to consideration received or receivable for specified services provided on or after the commencement of this chapter, and to consideration received or receivable for e-commerce supply services made or provided or facilitated on or after first day of April 2020. And then we have a provision which says if something is taxable as royalty and FTS, then it will not be taxable under as equalization levy. But if something is not taxable as royalty or FTS, then it can certainly be taxed as equalization levy. So in this case, what is happening? They are. Let me take you to the Equalization Levy Act. Just give me a minute. So here it is. We have section 165A, which says, hope you can read this. Now, see, this is publicly available information. By showing this on the portal, I'm not breaching any copyright act. I'm not breaching any copyright. 165A, on and from 1st day of April 2020, there shall be charged an equalization levy at the rate of 2% of the amount of consideration received or receivable by an e-commerce operator. So certainly it is e-commerce operator. We can go to the definition of e-commerce operator. I would request you to kindly go to section 165A. Very quickly, if you want to see the meaning of e-commerce operator, I have not downloaded the section, but certainly it will become the e-commerce operator. All the database owners, they will become an e-commerce operator. And if the payment which we are making them is not taxable as a royalty, in my humble opinion, or in my humble view, it should be considered as, it should be subject to equalization levy if the payment collected by them in aggregate is more than 2 crore rupees. Now I'm done with my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we would be happy to discuss the same. Any suggestions, any inputs if you have on this? So concluding, in most of the cases, the payment for database subscription charges will not become a royalty, at least under the DTA. So my suggestion is, one should have the tax residency certificate along with Form 10F, and preferably in such case, non-resident should have PAN so that they can file the return. If TRC and 10F is not there, under the Act, there is high probability the transaction will become taxable. Once we have concluded the transaction is not taxable, and if that position non-resident is already taken, then the non-resident should be aware that equalization levy in such cases is applicable. From a payer's perspective, if we are making a payment to the resident, if it is not taxable, we will not deduct any TDS. Equalization levy is not the worry of the payer, that is the worry of the recipient. So this is to sum up the today's session. I'm sure you must have liked this session. You must have got the clarity on how to deal such payments, payment for database subscription charges. And if you have any questions for me with regard to this session, we can discuss. Feel free to share your feedback. Thank you for today and see you soon. Thank you.